Well, today we'll take up on Savitri, which I have called as Savitri Sriaurobindo's magnum opus. First of all, we need to clear the issue, why did Sriaurobindo choose the legend of Savitri and Satyavan? That's a question that several people have asked. Is it only to perpetuate the old Mahabharata legend, which is a story of conjugal love between Savitri and Satyavan? Or is there any other reason? Well, perhaps you would know that this legend is the only connection between the Vedic period and the modern times. So Sriaurobindo has connected the present times to the Vedas through this story of Mahabharata, Savitri and Satyavan. So that is one of the reasons. Secondly, perhaps this story of Savitri and Satyavan is the only one that speaks about the conquest of death. And this theme suits very well Sriaurobindo's own aim of physical transformation and physical immortality. So because of all these things, perhaps, we never know, but this is what we guess, why it took up the story of Savitri and Satyavan, which I presume all of you here know, maybe except one or two people. But I wouldn't like to take time, because in this little short time, I presume that you all know the story. Now, some have compared Savitri to the Bhagavad Gita. Well, it's true. Bhagavad Gita is an epic, is a story, is a scripture that is connected with the modern man. Although it is thousands of years old, it does give us the modern spirit of the modern man, as I told you last time in my talk, how it connects us. But there's a little bit of difference. You see, Bhagavad Gita was given on an individual level, whereas we see Savitri is definitely on a cosmic level. The very fact of the protagonist, that is Arjun, was there on the level of the individual. He was a vibhuti, it is most probably. But Savitri is supposed to be an avatar. So already you see the difference. One is on the earth level, the other is on the cosmic level. That's the major difference. And then you have the Arjuna, the Pandavas versus the Kauravas. Who is the enemy? Is the other side, is the Kauravas. But here, the person to be conquered, the enemy, is not a human being. He is the primordial death, fate, and also we see destiny. So all these parameters tell us that the Bhagavad Gita is more on the earth level. Savitri takes us to the cosmic level. So we have all these things, and especially one of the common points that we see is that Arjuna was also given, as we said in our previous class, the secrets, what we said, Guhyam, Guhyataram and Guhyatamam. So these are the three levels, about the soul, about the avatar, and about the surrender. And very peculiarly, Savitri is also given the same solution. When she was in a depression, kind of, very much disgusted, deflated, that what is happening to her, because she was undergoing a tremendous tension. Then she is told, find out thy soul, recover thy hid self, in silence seek God's meaning in thy depths, then mortal nature change to the divine. So the solution seems to be the same. Be it Bhagavad Gita or be it Savitri, the secret is the same. That is, to find the soul first. And that's a really beautiful common point we find there. And then on the cosmic level, we see that after all, Arjuna was seeking an individual salvation. Whatever the teachings he was supposed to practice and gain an individual salvation. But that is not so with Savitri. She is not here to gain her own liberation or salvation. Because if you have read this book, you will see all the boons that the Supreme gives her. She does not take them. She says, no, I'll share it with earth and men. In fact, there's a beautiful line here which says, a lonely freedom cannot satisfy a heart that has grown one with every heart. I am a deputy of the aspiring world. My spirit's freedom I ask for all. So this is the basic dimension that we see. The one is the individual, earth dimension. The other is the collective, the humanity, and the cosmic. So someone who had really compared did not bring out these points. I thought it is interesting for us to note this because just in our last class we had done about Bhagavad Gita. Now secondly, people are a little afraid of Savitri because they say, oh, it's all mystic and spiritual truths which we cannot understand. But one thing we forget is that there are mystic and spiritual truths, no doubt about it. But it deals with the immediate life of the humans. That's one thing we have to focus on. It's not just about extraterrestrial and subtle physical and occult truths. It comes very close to human life, to individual life. And we see Sri Aurobindo deals with it in a masterly way. When I was reading this, I remembered the famous lines given by Sri Aurobindo. It says, the hand that sends Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl. This is the double dimension we see that Sri Aurobindo has in Savitri also. On one side, he is dealing with the supracosmic truths. At the same time, he is dealing with human problems. So Sri Aurobindo identifies with the far and the near, human incapacities and limitations, human depressions and dangers, which he is aware of, and the possibilities hidden within man. This is how he can describe closely, intimately, and with intensity of emotion, the emotional torture that Savitri undergoes. All of us know that there is a period where she suffers immensely. And this is a very beautiful point to see how Sri Aurobindo identifies with the torture and the tension that is going in the heart of Savitri. Because as all of us know, this secret of the death of Satyavan, no one else knows except Savitri. So she is the only person who is undergoing this torture and tension. And here is the great poet, who being an impersonal aspect, he can identify with Savitri's heart, emotions, her tension, her torture. And at the same time, he sees what could be the solution to this emotional torture in human beings. So this is where we see the impersonal aspect of the poet. And I suppose philosophically and spiritually, the best person who can help humanity is one who is impersonal. Otherwise, if you are too personal, you have desires, you have attachments, and your capacity to help humanity becomes limited. So here is one more aspect of Sri Aurobindo that comes forward, the impersonal aspect, and that is a beautiful example in Savitri we see. And then we see again, there are several passages where we see the Sri Aurobindo identifies with the human nature, its pains and prayers, its suffering, its limitations, and yet its evolutionary possibilities. There are umpteen number of passages, and one of them only I'll give you an example, where it says, O force-compelled, fate-driven, earth-born race, O petty adventurers in an infinite world, and prisoners of a dwarf humanity. How long will you tread the circling tracks of mind around your little self and petty things? This is about the human being. But not for a changeless littleness were you meant. Not for vain repetition were you built. Out of the immortal substance you are made. Your actions can be swift revealing steps. Your life a changeful mold for growing gods. A greater destiny waits you in your front. This transient earthly being, if he wills, can fit his acts to a transcendent scheme. So this is we see what we find in this seer poet, his capacity to see the immediate and also to see the future. That's why, many passages where people do not understand, but we can identify with these passages, which show him the extremely close, with a kind of intimacy, with emotion, with kind of concern, as we say, with human problems. So we should not think Savitri is only about the higher evolution, about avatar, about vibhutis and all that. But this element of Savitri, the touch of the human tears, as we say, is very, very, very beautifully brought out in Savitri. That's one aspect. And there's a second aspect which has been much discussed, and it is very, very obvious even, we cannot even avoid it. That's the aspect of the spiritual autobiography. This is something again that comes forcefully to the reader. You see, till now we have had quite many talks on different books of Sri Aurobindo, and we have seen that the Life Divine was written during the First World War, and we have said what was there in the Life Divine. You see, on one side mankind is going to be destroyed, and yet in the Life Divine we see a vision not only of the survival of humanity, but of its glorious golden future. That's a vision that Life Divine gives us. And then Savitri, very, very interestingly, is spent around the same time of the Second War. And you see, there is a vast difference between the First and the Second War. And Sri Aurobindo deals with Savitri during the Second War, when humanity was in greater danger of self-destruction, destruction of civilizations. And yet here is a poet who sits in a quiet corner in Pondicherry, and then he foresees, not only foresees, he envisions, he has experience of a new grand future. And this is something that we have to understand, that while in the Life Divine, we see there are his realizations of his spiritual experiences. Savitri is a manifestation of his spiritual experiences. That's the difference. Life Divine is realization of the divine, but Savitri is a manifestation of the divine in matter, in the physical. And that is what he has been doing, especially after 1926, which we saw was the turning point in his life. From the ordinary mind, he gets to the overmind, and from 1926 onwards, another 25 years, there's a journey towards the supermind. So during this time comes in Savitri. So Savitri is not only, as we say, ascent of his consciousness, but also it is a vision of how to bring down the supermind. So let us not think that Sri Aurobindo took 25 years to write Savitri. It is not the time. It was his own spiritual notebook, the growth, the ascent of his own spirituality. But at the same time, we have many letters where he's saying that I am bringing down the supermind. So the last 25 years of Sri Aurobindo's life was recorded in Savitri both as an ascent and a descent. That is why Savitri is a more comprehensive work, we can understand now. It's not just the ascent, there's a descent also into that. And it explains, you see, because of this ascent of consciousness, he resumed writing Savitri more or less after the 20s, in the early 30s. Although the earlier drafts were there in Baroda, but the real resumption of this writing of Savitri takes place after the 1926 event. And we see that he has been, there are several letters written to Amal Kiran where we see Sri Aurobindo keeps on revising, correcting, improving his own lines. I mean, sometimes we wonder that as a great poet and as a great seer, why did he have to do so many corrections? Because for us mortals, every line is a magnificent line. But he was not happy with that. He keeps on revising and correcting and making a line better in the light of the new consciousness. That is why it took him so long, because each time he reached the highest level of consciousness, he had a greater level of inspiration and better lines, beautiful images, more rhythm, and all that they came, and he did not hesitate to change the lines. So the next 25 years, from 1926 to 1950, towards the end, he went on, adding lines, improving his own lines. And this is as the mother would say, that he experienced all this as one experiences joys or sorrows physically. He walked in the darkness of inconscience, even in the neighborhood of death, endured the sufferings of perdition, and emerged from the mud, the earth's misery, to breathe the sovereign plenitude and enter the supreme Ananda. This is one side. But what is interesting, as some of you may know, it is a duplicate, double experience. On one side, Sri Aurobindo was experiencing this, and the mother herself says, all this is his own experience. And what is most surprising is that it is my own experience also, said the mother. It's a picture of our joint adventure into the unknown, or rather to the supermind. So this is where we see Savitri is a joint adventure of both Sri Aurobindo and the mother to the supermind, as well as its descent. So this is why we call this book a spiritual adventure, a spiritual autobiography. So that is there. On the second level, we can look at Savitri. First one we said is the human level. Second is the spiritual autobiography. There's one point I'd like to mention before I leave this point. You see, it's well known that Sri Aurobindo did not complete Savitri. Did not or could not, I would say, because of some reasons. Because the passages where it did not complete were passages on death. And he had not yet experienced the question of death. Because as we said, Sri Aurobindo has to experience a thing before he can write it. And death he did not. So he could not complete it. And yet at the same time he tells the mother, it's for you to complete this experience. So interestingly, we see that through the death of the body of Sri Aurobindo, it's the mother who experiences exactly as it happened with Savitri and Satyavan too. When Satyavan dies, the experience of death comes to Savitri. So this is exactly the same situation here with Sri Aurobindo and the mother, that some person leaves, that is Sri Aurobindo, but the mother has the experience of death. That is why after 1950, there begins really the journey of the mother's yoga. That means yoga of transformation. There are many passages where mother says that until 1950, until Sri Aurobindo was there in the physical, I did not do much. That means towards this transformation. It's because Sri Aurobindo was doing everything. But after this experience of death, she takes up and she does this second part of the journey, was really the transformation. So this is something that we come to know, that Savitri is completed by the mother in her own agenda. So that is the continuation of the experience of Savitri, which I had mentioned in my earlier talks also, that Savitri is only completed in the agenda. And so there were the relevance of the experiences of the transformation of the physical that the mother described there. Now we see another aspect, because of this intense yoga that both Mother and Sri Aurobindo did, and which is described line by line, page by page, we see that Savitri becomes a great book of yoga. So we call it epic poem, we call it autobiography, we call it anything you may call it. But as the mother says, it's essentially a book of yoga. We think of the synthesis of yoga, we think of so many other books. But Savitri is the book of yoga. And these four things, mother herself says that there are four aspects of yoga in Savitri. It's the record of yoga of the spiritual experiences of the individual who has written. That means this is a record of yoga of Sri Aurobindo. And of course he has written it, but simultaneously the mother also was experiencing. So it is the first thing is a record of yoga. Second is a complete system of yoga which can serve as a guide for those who want to follow the integral sadhana. So that's what I said, that this yoga is on both aspects, that is on the level of Sri Aurobindo's yoga and yoga for the common man. We have emphasized on that. The third one is most magnificent, is the yoga of the earth in its ascension towards the divine. You see, the mother herself is using the word yoga of the earth. And lastly, the experiences of the divine mother in her effort to adapt herself to the body she has taken and the ignorance of the falsity of the earth upon which she has incarnated. The fourth level is the yoga of the avatar. And in fact, to tell you the truth, these are the four levels that I have worked upon in this book, the four aspects. It's exactly these four aspects that the mother has delineated. How Savitri is wonderfully a book of yoga. Now coming back to the next point, what we have seen is that it is a book of yoga. But then, what is its substance? What is really what we say the content? And that can be given in very brief. If I use an image, Savitri, Sri Aurobindo covers in Savitri like a veritable Vaman avatar in three strides: the superconscient, the inconscient, and the earth in between. The ascent from matter to the supreme is given by Ashwapadi's travel, his yoga through the different worlds. The description of the descent from the superconscient to the inconscient into the caves of death is the purpose of Savitri's intervention. The upward travel of Ashwapati itself takes 35 cantos out of the 49 cantos, remember. The whole of Savitri is only 49 cantos, is about 24,000 lines. But out of this 49, 35 are given to Ashwapati's travel. So this Ashwapati's travel into the different worlds is nothing but Sri Aurobindo's own yoga. So you can imagine when the mother said it is the yoga of the author, 35 cantos is the yoga of the author. The remaining 14 cantos, of course, that covers Savitri's yoga, her finding Satyavan, her progress through the occult worlds, etc., her battle with death, etc. So that is the importance given to Sri Aurobindo's own yoga. That's why we said integral yoga of Sri Aurobindo is there fully in Savitri. And between the ascent of Ashwapati and the descent of Savitri is Satyavan. And who is Satyavan? He is the soul of man climbing to God. So Satyavan is a very important figure. He represents you and me. That means a soul evolving from matter to mind and from mind to the supermind. So Satyavan is in the middle. There is Savitri's descent and there is Satyavan's ascent. And he comes in between because he takes up all the evolutionary forces. He is open to new force, new consciousness that is brought by Savitri. And then he takes up the transformation. So that is in brief the three strides that we are spoken of. So this cosmic reach and heights of Savitri includes, as the mother herself says, mysticism, occultism, philosophy, the history of evolution, the history of man, of the gods, of creation, of nature, all is here. So it is not the question of only yoga, but it's a massive epic which covers mysticism, occultism, history of earth, history of evolution, history of man. So it is a massive book of the earth. That's where the mother says the yoga of the earth, because it covers all this question of earth's evolution and man's evolution. And so let us not think, by the time we say Savitri means immediately we think of Mahabharata, something of the past. No. It's not that it's things of the past, but that are happening now upon earth and that will happen upon earth in the future. So the name Savitri is only a link to the Vedic times, but otherwise it's a kind of a present continuous thing that is happening in humanity and upon earth, and that will take man towards the future. So it is there. There's one more thing. The names themselves, Savitri, Satyavan, Dimatsen, etc., should not only remind us of those people who lived in those times, thousands of years back. But Sri Aurobindo gives it a new significance, says no. They are emanations, they are incarnations or emanations of living and conscious forces with whom we can enter into concrete touch and they can take human bodies. So you see, this is another significance. When you are reading Savitri, let's not think that there is a story of Savitri who fell in love with Satyavan and all that. Sri Aurobindo gives them saying they are incarnations of emanations of living conscious forces. So these forces can be contacted even now. That means the Ashwapati's yoga, the person Ashwapati is not just a king, but he is a conscious figure who is still there to help those who want to do the tapasya. And of course, with us, it's much easier because Ashwapati is none else but Sri Aurobindo himself. So that question of tapasya is there in Sri Aurobindo. He can be contacted for the yoga sadhana. So that is the third aspect. And then, so we have seen the human aspect, spiritual autobiography, its content, and then the last one, that Savitri is not just these two, but those people, because in the Western hemisphere, in the Western countries, Savitri has been taken more as an epic, a literary aspect, a marvel of a literature, a marvel of a poem. So here, what Sri Aurobindo writes in his letters is that it represents overhead mantric poetry. And what is that overhead mantric poetry? You see, it's very beautifully described in his own book, The Future Poetry. So Savitri is a perfect and ample example of his own literary criticism given in Future Poetry. And remember, Future Poetry was written long before he wrote Savitri. So it is not that first he wrote Savitri and then he said, hey, what are the things that we should find out? No. So he had already a vision of the future of poetry that mankind is going to have. And what are the new parameters, new levels of inspiration, sources, language, all that is described in the future poetry. And so we are fortunate, we in the sense humanity is fortunate, that he has himself given an example, a perfect example of all the critical parameters that he has described in future poetry. I do not think if he had not given those characters, that example of Savitri, that humanity would ever have understood what exactly is the meaning of future poetry. So, thanks to Aurobindo, that we have a beautiful examples, samples, modules of all the descriptions given in the future poetry. So, if you want to approach Savitri as an epic, we have to understand what are the parameters of new future poetry given in that book. Otherwise, it becomes very general. People may not understand it. People may think it is lovely poetry. Some people may say lovely imagery. Some people may say we do not understand, etc., etc. But Savitri, to be understood literally as a literature, must be seen in the background of future poetry. So that's one thing I would like to say. Now, secondly, what is happening is another aspect of literature I would like to bring out. When we say this overhead mantric poetry, the three characteristics of the overhead mantric poetry: the truth, beauty, and delight. And that is the greatness of Savitri, that every line that you may read of Savitri, it has either truth, or beauty, or delight, or a combination of two or three. So that is why sometimes these are so easy to understand, because there is a truth on the level of matter, truth on the level of mind, truth on the level of life, truth on the level of nature. So we can see that sometimes lines are very simple, apparently so simple. All can be done if the God touch is there. It's very simple. That we can understand, there's no difficult word in that. But what is the truth? It's an extremely spiritual, metaphysical truth. If the God touch is there, we can do anything and everything. So like that, every line stands out with a beautiful element of truth. It can be spiritual thought, it can be spiritual feeling, spiritual sense, and at highest, the truth of what comes to us by the possibility of identity. So the beauty of Savitri as a piece of literature, that every line is a truth. A truth that is on different levels. So please do not think that every line has come from the supermind or from the overmind. That's a wrong notion. Because truth, when it manifests on different levels, is as important as the truth manifested on higher levels. The truth of the physical is as important as the truth of the supermind. So the poet cannot afford to miss the truth of the matter, saying, oh, that's lower than supermind, so I should always be on the superman. No. Because an epic has to take into consideration this entire magnificent manifestation of the divine. You cannot neglect matter and life because you are in connection with supermind or overmind. So that is how we have to have an openness and to see, oh my God, this line represents life truth or sensorial truth, truth of the senses, truth of life. So this is where people do mistake saying, oh, this is ordinary poet, what's big about that? Exactly. It's very simple, because that's the truth of matter or life or day-to-day thing. So that's one thing we should understand. But even if you don't understand it, what we see is that ultimately when we read Savitri, the greatest thing that we get out of it is the delight aspect. You see, some people may say we are not students of literature, we don't know what is rhythm and rhyme and imagery and all that. And yet we say, what is the summum bonum? What is it that you experience reading Savitri? Is the delight. So this aspect is what we enjoy. So that's why keep reading. As we said, reading of Savitri is important. In what sense? Because there is a trend, or in fact there is a continuous trend now. People are reading it more and more. Some people memorizing it. Some people really trying to understand, reading different critics and authors and hearing on YouTube. But reading has become very important, because if I can quote the mother, she says, every verse of Savitri is like a revealed mantra, and to read Savitri is indeed to practice yoga. Remember that line. To read Savitri is indeed to practice yoga. So we have been given in this integral yoga so many supports. You have this question of the bhakti, devotion to the divine, surrender to the divine. All that is there. But I feel that it is so simple. She has brought that the whole question of integral yoga to such a simple level, saying that to read Savitri is indeed to practice yoga. So you see, we in India have been reading Bhagavad Gita or the Upanishads or the Vedas or some other scriptures. But here is Sri Aurobindo and the mother, who have given us, for the present and for the future of humanity, another great scripture. So even if we do not understand it, we need to read it. We could read that on a daily basis. In fact, there are many people who read it on a daily basis. But then the mother says, in fact gives us a very beautiful hint, but you must not read it as you read other books or newspapers. You must read with an empty head, a blank and vacant mind, without there being any other thought. You must concentrate much, remain empty, calm and open. Then the words, rhythms, vibrations will penetrate directly. So remember, the condition is the heart that receives Savitri, not the mind. So the mind has to be calm to such an extent that it becomes blank and vacant. So do not bring in your literary critical analysis saying, oh, what is this word, what is this rhythm, what is this rhyme, etc. Let not the mind intervene trying to understand. You see, there are devotees who can take up this. But there are some critical minds who say, no, we like to understand it as a point of literature. Welcome. But for the sake of sadhana, you see, there are two ways of looking at it. If you want it to be a help for your sadhana, then try not to understand. Just keep a blank, my mother herself says, a blank, vacant mind. Which means no criticism of analysis, of his reading, of his capacity. Keep it low. He says you must concentrate much, remain empty, calm and open. Then the words, rhythms, vibrations will penetrate directly. The direct method is by the heart. I brought this quotation because many of you want to read it or are reading it. But then the simple word suggestion from the mother is, the direct method is by the heart. If you try to concentrate really with this aspiration, you can light a flame, the psychic flame, the flame of purification. So if you ask in one word, what is the use of reading Savitri? Why should we read Savitri? Well, not only the mother says to read Savitri is to practice yoga, but what is the meaning of practicing yoga? It's not the question of purification and all that. It could be. But she gives us a very beautiful hint. By reading it with the heart, you can light a flame, the psychic flame. So people may be wondering, how do we really awaken the psychic being? Umpteen ways are there described by them. But again, Savitri brings you close to the simple practice of reading Savitri. So these are some of the points that I wanted to tell you. But then, as she said, ultimately, read it with your heart, not with your mind. So it does not matter if you do not understand, but just try to drink in the beautiful rasa, the delight. So let this sink in you. And then the mother again tells us that Savitri promises to take you to the highest steps of the ladder of yoga. I mean, she has given us so many hints of why to read Savitri. Takes you to the ladder of yoga, it's a practice of integral yoga, and it lights a flame within you. So keep on reading it, and then we'll see slowly our own spiritual growth happens. So Savitri is not a book of the past, but one of a future towards which earth is evolving, secure in the hands of Sri-Aurobindo and the mother. I purposely put secure in the hands of Sri-Aurobindo and the mother, because if you read Savitri, you will see the vision that we understand, that how Savitri, Sri-Aurobindo or the mother, they have seen the world, the future world of the supermind. They are molding it, they are taking care of that, and then it is in their consciousness. So, in fact, there is a line from Savitri. Savitri herself tells the Supreme Mother, not the mother, is the death. She says, my soul and his indissolubly linked in the one task for which our lives were born, to raise the world to God in deathless light, to bring God down to the world on earth we came, to change the earthly life to life divine. So it is they who have brought supermind, it is they who are taking the humanity towards supermind. So that's why I said the world is secure in their hands. So this is just, I've tried to give you some highlights because, this 24,000 lines with this whole world and a universe in front of you, we cannot do much. But I've just given you an approach to see you can approach it on the human level, on the spiritual autobiography, at the point of literature. So with these complex things, you can now understand how Savitri goes beyond all his other writings. And that's why no wonder the mother said, I believe it is his message. All the rest is preparation, while Savitri is the message. So it's wonderful to see that he had written so many great volumes in this area. I mean, each volume is a new path for humanity. And yet, what comes after Arya, that is Savitri, is the real message. That's why when Sri Mother says, rest is a preparation. So the great life divine, the great synthesis of yoga, the great essays on the Gita, the great Upanishads, the Isha Upanishads, and the Vedas, everything that is written in Arya is only a preparation. Preparation for what? It's not a question of the thought level. If you see what all has gone in life divine, from the point of view of philosophy, metaphysics, thought is there in Savitri too. All that is there in the synthesis of yoga, it is there. It's not that Sri Aurobindo has given us new thought on Savitri. But why is the mother saying, is a preparation? Whereas Savitri is a message. Preparation to manifest the new consciousness. Because as I told you before, that Sri Aurobindo is bringing down, manifesting the supermind. So Savitri is a manifestation of the supermind. Life Divine is a pointer to supermind. And of course, the synthesis is there to help us walk the path. No wonder the Savitri is admired over the world, all over the world. And those of us who would like to take it up, because once you start reading it, somewhere it captures you. The language or the imagery or anything, you can take it from any angle. But here you see the impersonal Sri Aurobindo, the very personal Sri Aurobindo because of his yoga, and the very personal touches of the mother. And also, he keeps a thin line of the story of Mahabharata. So it's a magnificent thing that connects you to the Vedic period, to the contemporary. It's a magnificent epic that connects you with the present, to another 1,000 years of humanity's future. So it is this grand, is a magnificent and profound significance. That's what it can be, it is. So, I try to give you in a very much of a nutshell, but it's for you to now take it up and pursue. Please read it as much as you can. There's not much of a dialogue that we can take up on this, because we have given many talks, many sessions, but still, if you want to take any help or questions or anything, most welcome. Yeah, next class, I don't know what I'm going to take. I'm thinking, not yet confirmed, is to take up the Isha Upanishad. You see, you must have seen the trend of my talks. I've taken till now all those books which are directly connected with spiritual experiences of Sri Aurobindo. All of them in a way have been autobiographies, be it the Life Divine, be it the Synthesis, be it the Gita, be it the Savitri. So these 4 books are purely autobiographical, given in a different manner. One philosophy, one yoga, one Gita, one this way. So this has been my sort of take there, that let me connect these books to him. So here the poet, the writer, the author, and what is written are one and the same. So after this, I may plan to take up Isha Upanishad and the Ideal of Humanity, etc., which are not directly connected with your spiritual experiences, but which have grown out of his own experiences. The understanding, the vision and all that, they have grown out of their own, his evolution of consciousness. So that's why I chose these 4, which are autobiographical. Next 3 talks would be not necessarily autobiographical, but surely a growth and evolution of his own consciousness. Right? Thank you then. Welcome for the next session. Bye.
Thank you, sir.